And now for something completely different.
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Gomez.
And thank you and welcome back to episode 2 of Realities of Publishing Comics. I'm Paul Gomez, and here I've got the topic today of editors. And do you really need one? I mean, there's a lot of discussion out there whether you do need an editor or don't need an editor. And there's a lot of people that jump on either side of those. Me personally, I believe editors are one of the unsung heroes of comics. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion, and of course, I understand that some people decide not to go with an editor. The main reason I tell people to go with an editor, and I try to tell each and every person this, is if you're a creator, it's kind of hard to get yourself away from that project. Sometimes, in most cases that you're building a project, you're just way too close to a project to kind of step away and see from the reader's point of view or from another point of view that you just don't understand what you're missing. And that's, to me, the main reason to get an editor. Now, there are hundreds and hundreds of reasons to get an editor. Probably the only reason not to get an editor is probably the price. But even still, the editors are probably the lowest priced item that you're going to get whenever you are making a comic. So, as I said, I do recommend making sure that you get an editor, because not only if you get the right one, they're not just going to help polish your product. They're going to probably be your best friend on the whole journey of making that comic. Now, there's different styles of editors out there, and this is one of the most important things that I never understood whenever I decided to get an editor. Whenever you're looking for an editor, make sure you know what questions to ask. Now, there are several different styles, including whether if you're looking for just an editor who checks grammar or the story or the pacing. One type of editor might not be exactly the best for every situation. If you're looking for a specific genre, make sure that you're talking to an editor and tell them, hey, this is the kind of genre that I'm looking for. And there's some editors out there that just proofread. So make sure whenever you're talking to them, ask them about their rates, because some editors have different rates for different projects, whether they are just proofreading it, whether they're covering the whole thing. There are some editors out there, and I know a few of them, that actually project manage with you, and they'll charge a little bit extra. a lot of them out there, and this is one thing that I never knew before getting into it, was that a lot of editors know a lot of artists. Considering the fact that they work on so many different books, that they actually get to deal with so many artists and see different art styles, that they can actually collaborate with those artists and bring them to the creator and kind of match them up. One of the things is whenever you're collaborating with an artist, and if you don't know how to talk to them, if you have a great editor, he can be that bridge, that gap between a creator and an artist. Now, if you are obviously the creator, writer, and artist, then you don't need that editor to bridge that gap. But again, separating yourself from the project is always a hard thing to do. An editor has that keen eye that kind of looks at things from a different perspective. Pacing and continuing is always a good thing. So whenever I say there are also different types of editors, some editors are really just story editors, cover, correct spelling, and the way things are written. Whenever you're talking about a comic book editor, there's a lot more involved into it. I mean, if you're thinking about establishing shots or the way the panel flows or the page turns, these are some things that comic book editors have that most editors don't. And that's another thing that you really want to ask them. Do they understand the flow of a comic book? Do they understand how page turns work and how that comic's going to be structured? I've always told people, whenever you first start a project, make sure you know the numbers. Also, I wanted to mention that today in the midpoint, we are going to have a special guest today. Chuck Pineau is going to be here. He'll be here to answer a few harder questions than I've got. But he's been one of my editors, and he's helped me along. I've had to deal with a few editors, and I've loved every minute and enjoyed everything with an editor. One of the things, though, I tell people is whenever you do have an editor, don't expect for them to always be hugs and sunshine. Editor is going to tell you the hard truth, and if they're not telling you the hard truth, you really need to find an editor who is going to tell you that. Because if you don't have somebody who's telling you the truth, then how do you know that you're getting your money's worth, and how do you know that your work is going to shine that extra mile? An editor can do several different things, but the continuous flow of a book isn't just the only thing, not just the pacing or the way the art style looks, but they also understand kind of how the bubbles and the wording need to be placed and how things need to be pinpointed, if you will. Whenever I first started out, I didn't really know much, and I went and looked for an editor. I interviewed a good 10, 15 editors before I found the one that I wanted. And I remember asking questions like, how hard of an editor are you going to be? Because I really wanted somebody who was going to help me mold my writing style into the best that it could be. I didn't want a yes man. And there are a few editors out there that are going to be a little bit easier on you than most. But like I said, I wanted somebody that was going to help me understand it and help me know what I was getting into. The editor I luckily found, he actually showed me how to write a script, and we're going to definitely jump into script writing next episode. But an editor is going to be able to pinpoint not only how your script is written, and it is a real important thing that you have a good script that's written out pretty well, because if the editor can't understand where you're going and what you're trying to convey, how is the artist going to know what to draw? That's the real importance of a script, but also an editor to kind of understand and know where you're at and where you're going with everything. I always say that the editors make my work shine. If I was to say, like, the comic book was a football team, you were the owner because you do have that complete control over it. But you don't want to be the owner, GM, and the coach. You want somebody in there that can understand it, step away, and tell you what the right and wrong things are to give to your artists. And that's what an editor does most of the time. they make things shine and see things, the problems that you don't see. It's not just a second pair of eyes, it's a skilled second pair of eyes. That's how I say that they help you shine the most. When working with an editor, like I've said before, understand that they're not going to be there with just hand holding and sunshine. They're going to give you notes and they're going to show you problems. And it's one of the key things to understand and take criticism. A lot of creators, it's kind of hard whenever you write stuff down and you think this is exactly what I want, but sometimes you might not know where those problems are. One of the key problems that I had in one of my scripts was I didn't exactly name my characters that often. And how was it that my readers were going to know the names of the characters if I didn't put it in the script? I mean, sure, as the writer and creator, I knew who the characters were and I knew what they were doing. And in my script, it had those names pinpointed out to every page where they were doing stuff. But in the actual dialogue or wording, did it have those names enough? Did it convey exactly what they were doing or who they were? And whenever you're talking about dialogue and captions and other stuff like that, an editor is going to be able to tell you which is the correct way to go with it. Sometimes if you don't understand how to script, they're going to be able to pinpoint those to let you know, hey, this is what the artist is going to need. This is what they're working with, and this is what they're going to see. But the way you're writing it, this is the way they're understanding it, which isn't your idea. So it's a collaborative effort. Sometimes there's a give and take there. And I understand as a creator, you kind of have this idea and you want to make it yours and you don't want anyone else's hands in that pot. But the thing about it is you have to understand and be a little bit humble that it's not just you that's making it. It's the editor's going to put his name on it and he's going to have his reputation behind it. And he's going to be working with these artists to let them know that, hey, this is the correct way it's going to flow and this is the correct way we need things to go. One of the things that I definitely had whenever I got my first editor was a relationship like a best friend. He showed me how to not only learn how to script, but also how to identify different art styles. And some editors are going to step out and kind of show you that stuff as well. And this is why I think that editors are important. They've been around a little bit longer and they've seen a little bit more. They've been able to proofread and understand stories, and they're going to be able to convey to you, hey, this is what you need to work on. This is what needs to shine a little bit better. And this is what's working the most. And editors ain't telling you what they think is wrong just because they want to tell you something's wrong. They want to convey a reason behind it as well, to let you understand and let you know this might not be what the reader understands or is thinking while reading your words. Your words might be out there and take them to a different point whenever you're actually trying to go down the middle of the road, but without saying the correct dialogue or correct way that the character is being drawn. It's not going to lead that reader to understand that. And that's where editors step in. They help show you, help shine the way, and help guide you where everything is going to go. This is why I say that editors are important. Now, like I said, I understand the opposite side of it as well. You do feel like you have that need and want to be in control of everything, but whenever it comes to comic books, it is a team effort, especially if you're just the writer and creator. You do have those other pieces, the cover artists, the interior artists, and whether you have one interior artist or three of them, that's going to be a lot of communication. If you're the creator, writer, and editor, it's going to be a lot more burden on your shoulders than it really needs to be. Usually the cost of the editors are pretty decent. And whenever you're going out there and looking, they'll have different packages. Like I said, some of them will be out there just proofreading or spell checking. But the main thing you really want is the flow of the story and the complete dialogue and way everything's put together. Make sure whenever you're interviewing an editor, you have questions for them. It's not that you just go out there and find an editor and hire the first one that comes around. Let them know the genre of your book. Give them an elevator pitch or a short summary of it. Tell them what's happening with your book and how you want to go with it. And ask them how they can help you. Well, like I said, a lot of editors know plenty of artists. Tons of artists, and they can help you match your art with your story. So I always advise, whenever you're starting out, once you have your story, go look for your editor and then start your scripting after that. Now, usually your editor wants that script right when you're hiring them, but to me, I believe if you hire an editor, have that script within a week or so to give to them, and then start going from there, because sometimes if you're a brand new writer and creator, you might not understand how to script write. And if you have an example to give to them, that's great. But understand, the main form of communication between you, your editor, an artist, or anyone that's outside of your mind is really going to be that script. So the editor is going to help shine that up a little bit. And it's okay not to have the entire thing before you get that editor. If you can have like a few pages for them and then show them an example of your work to make sure that you're on the right pace. Sometimes they'll give you examples or where to look. And that's what my first editor did. He gave me about 10 examples, showed me a few books where to go read, and kind of flowed from there. Like I said, there's a lot of things that editors are going to pinpoint that you need to work on, whether it's dialogue or whether it's the description of the panels. The description of the panels, an editor is going to help tell you not only where your viewpoint should be, but also what characters should be in that panel and how they should go. Now, if you have an understanding of it and don't need them to exactly overhaul it, that's great. But being a brand new creator, sometimes you do need a panel look to a little bit overhauled. Maybe sometimes. Is there any one thing that stands out between you and any of your editors in a learning curve? So like I said, a lot of the editors have been around a lot longer. So they're going to know a little bit more. Whenever I first got my first editor, he happened to have been able to give me so much knowledge into it. Whenever he showed me a lot of examples of scripts, because I didn't even know how to script the first time I talked to him. I had handed him a page of a 50-page story that I wrote. And whenever he asked me, well, where's your script? At that point, it was like, I didn't know what I was getting into being a brand new creator. And I asked him what type of script did I need, because I didn't know what TV scripts looks like and play scripts look like. But having a comic book script to give to him was a totally different thing. And that's one of the things I mentioned. A comic editor is going to be a little bit different than most editors, because they're going to know that you have to have those page turns or those page separations, and they're going to explain that to you. So whenever I first started doing scripts, I didn't exactly realize, there's that first page that's an establishing shot that leads into that main story. And then those next two pages that are continuous, you see both of those pages at once. So you kind of have that flow. And an editor is going to be able to understand and let you know where your script should start breaking and moving along from one point to another. I think the main thing that an editor is going to have is that knowledge that he's been in that industry and has looked at so many scripts that he's going to be able to help you fine-tune your scripts and fine-tune your story to place it into a comic book. Like I said, I didn't know much whenever I first started. So having a 50-page story, I had to realize that it had to be broken down into a 32-page book for my first issue and a 22-page book for my second issue, or second book that I released. And while I was working with that editor, he explained to me not only, that first and last page, but also the way the story had to flow. In my first book that I released, I remember one of the main notes that I had from my editor was some 3 of the pages were full page shots. And it was basically, he wanted to know why I was doing it and what my thinking was behind it and what I was trying to convey to the reader. And these are the type of thing that editor will ask a writer so that they can understand where you're coming from. They're not trying to get in your way, but they're trying to make sure that your idea shines the correct way. And that's what I think that an editor brings to the table, is that experience and that knowledge, but also, being able to make sure that the reader's going to understand what you're trying to convey to them. It's often that editors are actually writers as well, and plenty of them are. And sometimes you can kind of see how their work flows. If you happen to take an example of their work before hiring them, you kind of see how their work is from page to page. So one of the things that I advise if you're a brand new creator is not only make sure you have a list of questions whenever you're hiring an editor, but if they have any work prior to you actually going into a partnership with them, check it out. Make sure that it feels right to you, because their work is going to kind of shine through to you as well. And I know a lot of creators kind of just say, hey, if I'm going to hire an editor, I'm going to hire an editor. But that's not the way it is. Like I said, there's different styles of editors. Make sure that they're comfortable with the genre that you work with. Some editors might not like sci-fi. Some might not be comfortable with horror. And they'll let you know that. Some editors will just proofread and whatnot. And some editors will be more comfortable with comic knowledge as well. Having a little bit more comic knowledge is definitely better, because if they're going to be working with you in that space, they're going to help you understand it all and help your story be the best that it can be. I don't know how editors start out. I've been asked to edit 1 or 2 things, and I know whenever I edited things that they were a little bit harder for me to convey to those creators and writers. To me, it was hard because I didn't want them to think I was picking on them. I wanted to show them the best route to get their message across. So in the few books that I've helped edit, it was basically, hey, here's my suggestions. Here's what I'm thinking. One of the books that I helped edit had about 6 pages of fight and about 3 panels each. And it happened to be 2 people fighting. And it was just punch, 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 punch between the same 2 people. I felt it didn't need to be 6 pages. And if you wanted to have all those panels, you could have condensed it into 2. And he actually did take away about 4 pages and added more to the storyline to develop his character more, which I felt was definitely more appropriate. One of the things whenever you're looking for an editor, make sure you ask them how much time that they're going to put into it, how everything's going to come across, and definitely how much they're going to put into your book as well. Some editors are just going to take the book, clean it up, and then bring it back and then give you 1 or 2 revisions. And this goes with artists too. Sometimes whenever you're going into a contract with them or hiring somebody, make sure that you can go back and talk to them about stuff. A lot of editors kind of have an open door, but some don't. Make sure that you know whether they do or don't. Make sure that there's kind of that amount of revisions or how many times you can go back and talk to them. And these are just a few things that I never understood whenever I came into it. Of course, the first editor that I hired, he happened to helped me out abundantly. I mean, he was an amazing editor that went out of his way to show me not only how to script write, not only show me how to polish my story up, but was along for the ride for most of the time. So it really depends what you need or not for an editor. But like I always say, it's always best to have that second set of eyes. I've had a few people that asked me if they really needed an editor and if they could get away without one. And to me, I always said, if you can't afford to hire an editor, go to a local school, find an English teacher, someone that'll help you, someone that's adept. I'd prefer somebody who's actually got knowledge about comic book stuff to make your story shine in that comic book knowledge. But having a second set of eyes with that knowledge is better than not having one at all. So the main thing, like I said, it's not just a creator that's there. It's going to be the editor that's going to put their name on it and make sure that you understand that their reputation is part of it as well. It's also the artist's reputation and the cover artist's reputation. I made a book, had a bit of a sensitive subject matter. So whenever I went to the editor or artist, I always made sure, hey, this is what it's about. I want to make sure that you know what it is about before you put your name on it, jump on board with this project. Whenever you're making a list of questions to ask an editor, what genre, how much effort you're going to put into it, what all you're going to cover for your services, but also are you willing to cover everything of the subject matter that's in here? One of the things I always ask of any of my team, whether it is my editor or artists, cover artists, are you going to help push the book? Personally, I believe it's the creators or anybody who has profitability after the fact that I believe it's their purpose to go push it. But if you're hiring somebody, you definitely want them to put their name behind it a little bit and kind of push it as well. You don't exactly expect them to go on 20 or 30 shows like the creator should, but definitely if they're going to push it on a digital platform at least once or twice for you, that's definitely better than not having someone that's not going to push it at all. So make sure that you make a list. Make sure you know what kind of editors you're looking for, and make sure that you know what kind of story you're going to have before going into that conversation with the editor. It is good to have a script before you go into with an editor, but if you are brand new as a creator and a writer, sometimes an editor is going to help you out, and sometimes it might be included in some of their packages to show you different types of scripts and different types of scripts that would work with your project a little bit more. Of course, with scripts, there are no one specific way to do it, but like I said, that is your main communication between you and your editor, you and your artists, and you and anyone else who's going to see that project before it actually gets to print. So make sure everyone on board is on the same page, and that's why it's important to make sure that you're asking those editors the right questions. Now, I've only dealt with a handful of editors myself. I believe about 5 that I've actually hired, and a few more that I've questioned and talked to throughout my year. And the main thing is they are definitely not there to pick apart your work. They do want to make sure that it is polished, cleaned, and the best version that it can be. Some editors are a little bit more strenuous, and some are a little bit more hands-off. That's definitely a question that I would ask. How much input are you going to put into it as opposed to just giving me notes? I know one thing is, me personally, I work better whenever I'm talking to a person over the phone or on a stream, but I do know some editors that just work in notes. So that's not exactly a bad thing, especially if you don't want to talk over the phone or face to face. But that is one question to ask before getting into that. You don't want to be the type of person that doesn't exactly do well on phone calls or take criticism that well, but would rather have the notes and then come to find out after you hire them that that's the way it's going to be. Remember that the editor's working there for you. And one of the best things that I ever heard an editor say is, you're hiring me for my knowledge, for the experience that I have, and for the advice that I'm going to give you, but I'm not going to step in your way on your vision. And like I said, if it is your project, it is your vision, it is your say, but understand that editors usually have that much more experience, and they're not trying to hurt you. They are trying to make the best out of what you've got and try to make sure that the audience knows exactly what you're talking about. But as far as editing, I pretty much had a decent route with editor. I've never had any fights. Never think that you're going to have a simple time throughout the entire process. To me, having an editor is like having a sibling work on your project. They're going to help you out, but there are going to be those fights, or not fights, disagreements. Sometimes it's going to be something that you definitely want to push a little bit harder than what they do. And most editors that I've worked with give you a reason for wanting to change something, or why you should double check something or take a double take on stuff, whether it is a panel or a page, whether it's a story flow or panel flow. 90% of the time I've had them give me a reason, and it's been an honest exchange back and forth. And that's the way I think a good editor and writer should be. There should be that communication back and forth, a little bit of this and that, a little give and take. And I understand as a creator, it is your idea and the project that you want to do, but sometimes it doesn't come off that way to the reader. And now we're going to take a few moments and get our special guest in.
What is up?
What's happening?
It's
Great to see you.
Thanks, homie. Right back at you.
So let me see if I get this right, because I always get it wrong. My amazing guest is Chuck. Hold on. I'm going to get this. It's Chuck. Please go back. Blalock 3. Oh, wait.
That's correct. That's correct.
That is correct.
That's correct.
Right. How are you doing today?
I'm good, homie. I'm good. I literally just got in the door and I'm ready to go. So
awesome.
I got your back. Let's do this.
Awesome. So we're talking about editors, and should we hire them? Do you hire editors?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I do.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm a put your money where your mouth is kind of guy. So I think it's really disingenuous to tell people get an editor, and then use myself. I think it's a dick move. So yeah, I always have editors. The only time I might not worry about one as much is when I do, like, say, one of my little, like, 4-page shorts or something. But even then, my wife, who is an editor, still goes over them and does the proofing and all that. So I've always got someone on the book. So yeah, there's always an editor on my stuff.
And I was telling my viewers, I was like, I understand sometimes cost is hard, especially whenever I had to go do it. And it was like, I really want to cut costs. I've had a few creators tell me, hey, I can't afford an editor. I can't even afford this. And I tell them, go find an English teacher at a school or somebody who has a little bit of knowledge. Now, they're not going to have the comic book knowledge that I tell people that an editor needs, that panel flow and that turn page and those establishing. And I tell them some editors are different because they don't understand that. They think of editing just as in a story wise, and a comic book editor is a little bit unique, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. Because there's so much more. I mean, when you're talking about a comic book editor, the extra things that go on top is you need to have that panel flow. Pacing is completely different in a comic compared to a novel or anything else.
Right.
of course, being able to edit lettering, being able to edit colors, and any kind of art direction and whatnot, all that sorts of stuff. So that's all extra stuff that goes into that. And of course, because you're doing comics, there's questions that a comic editor would ask that a novel editor might not. Like,
Right.
is this a one shot? How many issues is this going to be? How far in are we? Like all these kinds of things that, again, a novel editor probably wouldn't think to ask.
And how many pages? I tell every one of my people that come up and ask me how to create a comic, it's always like, first things first, make sure you know how many pages it is, because it's going to require where you start and end that story, or how much the cost is going to go into it. That page number is a huge deal, and editors are going to be able to help you with that.
Well, and thank you for bringing that up, because that actually leads into a really good story. I was editing a book that an artist had written, and it was his first book writing, first time writing and whatnot, and he did a great job. It was a lot of fun. But at one point I said to him, I was like, we have a big problem though. I was like, you have a double page spread on pages 5 and 6. And he was like, yeah, okay. And I was like, that's the same piece of paper. He's like, wait, what do you mean? And I was like, literally 5, then you turn, and that's 6. And he was like, oh shit. And I was like, yeah, you can't do that. It's got to be 4 and 5, or 5 and 6, or you have to somehow start page 1 on the off page, which is not normally done. So
can we put an ad in the page before that?
Something, yeah.
What are we gonna do?
Yeah. So luckily, I mean, he was able to play around and deal with that. But I mean, again, that's also something else that a novel editor would never think of.
Or like I say, if you're a first-time writer or first-time artist creating something, you don't think of those page turns. You don't think of where you're putting those. And this is one of the things that my first editor taught me. Now, I was going to ask you, because you didn't exactly really hammer me on my scripts. We worked together on my last 2 books. Do you help people with scripts? Like formatting them and how to write scripts and stuff like that?
So I don't tend to hammer as much on formatting because formatting scripts, there's not a single way to do it.
Right.
So really at the end of the day, it's, will your artist understand this? So sometimes I will say to someone, hey man, your script is super messy and your artist is going to have a hard time. And I'll tell you, a lot of time it's, like, I do. And if shit gets screwed up, this is on you, just so you're aware. Like, I warned you. So I might,
the knowledge.
Yeah.
If you don't take it.
Yep. But I've been paid to come in and format before. Like, hey, could you just format the script? Yeah, no problem. Bop, and
Right.
I'll format it and set it up, or I'll format a page and say, hey, this is a pretty good rundown of what a page should look like, and then you can go from there if you really want. And yeah,
because my first editor that I worked with, he actually gave me one of his scripts and said, hey, this is an example, but also I want you to go Google a script from, Moore or Miller or,
Yeah.
And so I did for like 2-3 days. I just started looking at different scripts and how they were written, and kind of came up with my own, and just went from there.
That's why I don't have to hammer you about scripts, because you did your research and it was pretty obvious. I'll throw him under the bus, and this is meant with all love and respect. Sean on the Blalock series, he edits, like co-edits with Wendy. Now, Wendy is mostly worrying about sentence structure, voice work, that kind of stuff. He does voice work too, obviously, because these are very much his characters too. But he's looking for the story and checking, watching pacing and all that kind of stuff. And at one point, he was like, so he started correcting some of the dialogue or some of the stuff that I was saying in my panel descriptions.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, don't touch my panel descriptions. And he was like, what? And I was like, you don't need to do that. As long as the artist understands what's going on,
right,
that's all that matters. But you don't need to be like going through and telling me, I don't think this sentence is worded very well. Did you understand what I meant? Yeah. Then shut the fuck up. Like, I'm fine,
Right.
man. Like, and he was like, oh, okay. I was like, and I don't hit a lot of people on that again, unless I look at it and I go, I don't know what the fuck you mean, man. And if I don't know what you mean, your artist isn't going to know what you mean either.
And like I was just saying, this is your main source of communication for your entire group, your entire, people who are going to be working on your project. So you want to make it nice and clean and making sure that they understand and can communicate with you through that script to understand what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much we can talk about, the stuff that we work with together or what we can't. But I'm going to throw it out there and you tell me if it's too much or not. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So we did work on 2 scripts together, and, my Cryptic Haze and my last one. My Cryptic Haze was the first time that we worked together, and I had done research on you. I don't know if you knew this or not. I had seen you on a show, and I did some research because I was needing an editor, and I thought you had some great work. When we started talking about that first script, it was kind of like, here are the notes, and here are some of the things I think you need to change or go back and look at. So 90% of it, I definitely thought you were right on 90% of it. There was like 1 or 2 things that you were like, hey, you might want to look at this because this is what it makes me believe. And I'm like, that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yes.
So I was telling my viewers, I was like, an editor is going to put their name on it and their reputation on it. They're not trying to hinder you. They're trying to make it the best that you can. So whenever they're giving you those pointers or ideas or tips, they're going to give you reasons. And that was the one of those times that you gave me this big reason. And I was like, I was glad you gave me that reason because, I came back to you and said, that's exactly what I wanted the reader to think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, this is what this is why I loved working with you, because we had that give and take thing. Some editors don't do that as much and some do. But, whenever we did that, it's like, I tell people, make sure you're able to talk to your editor, because if you can't talk to them, how are you going to get the best out of your script? The services that you're getting from.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you. I think one of the most important things is, first off, the two of you need to be able to communicate and work well together. If that doesn't work, you might just want to be like, hey, it's not happening, and I don't think that we're gonna gel. And it's so important that you guys are able to work off each other. And I think bedside manner is something that is often not considered as often as it really should be.
Yeah.
So I fully agree with you there. And you know what? I mean, I just barely heard some of the stuff you were saying as I was coming in. And you're right. Like, especially, so if I'm an editor for a company, you're not my client. The company is.
Right.
So when I come in and I say, hey, I need you to do this, you don't really get to say no as much, because again, you're not my client. The company is. The company paid you to write something and me to make sure that it works for them. Right. So that's that. But in the case of you and most of the people I've worked with, as far as freelance is concerned, I work for you. If you don't like one of my suggestions, then just say, yeah, I disagree. But what I do tell people is, don't tell me no. Tell me no because. Give me a reason. Because if you just say, well, I like it, well, that's a fucking shitty reason, because I'm not here to stroke your ego and make you feel better about the book you're about to write. I'm here as a potential fan, as the eyes of a fan, to say, hey, this is going to be really cool or this is not. And just because you think it's cool does not mean that a fan will think it's cool. Especially if, say, I'm not understanding what's going on. Oh my gosh, I got a fucking cat on my shoulder. Oh. what's up,
I don't think you
kid?
understood what was going on.
Right? And be careful, because he's a kitten, and he's got mad claws, and he loves my phone. So whenever he sees anything on it, he tries to attack it. So either stay up there or go see mom, but stay away from the phone, okay, buddy? You want to get down? Yeah. Away from the phone, bud. There you go. So yeah, you're thanks, man. You're freelance. You work for them, and you got to make sure that they're happy. But as a writer, you also want to respect when they say, "Hey, this isn't going to work." At least give a good reason why you think it will, or why you really want to push. You know what? I'll give a good example. And this is me as the writer, not as the editor. In Belial 3, I had a joke that I thought was fucking hilarious, and I was super proud of. And I showed it to Wendy and Sean, and both of them said, I don't know this. It was based on a Shakespeare quote. And they were like, I don't know this quote. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, I don't know it, so I don't get the joke. Like, they got how it was funny, but they didn't understand what was being said to make it funny.
Right.
And I was like, oh, shit. So I really wanted that joke in there, though, but I can't fight that a big chunk of my audience was about to not understand it.
Right.
So we had to find a way to tell that joke and make the audience understand the reference so that we could still tell that joke. And that was something that the three of us then talked out, worked over, found a workaround, and that joke's still in there, and I'm super proud because now the joke is much more layered and hits on several different levels because I was willing to listen to the two of them and go, cool, I get that. How can we make it work?
And I tell all new creators, it's a give and take thing. Whether you're dealing with your artists or your editor, there's got to be a little bit of leeway that you give to them because they do put their name on it, and you want to be part of it as well, and you're trying to clean it up as much as possible. Creators, I think, tend to be a little bit too close to the project. I know I was on just about every project. I know my latest project, you told me, make sure you're naming your characters in the dialogue because people won't know who the characters are if you don't name them. Sure, they're in the script named, but they don't see the script. And I know who they are because in my head I'm like, oh, this is this doing this. But if it's not in the dialogue as much, or captions or something, then how do people know it?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's actually a big one that people forget all the time. Is I'll be like, hey, no one knows this guy's name. Why are you even using it?
Right.
And like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, you never use the person's name. So, and I remember reading one where, like, 20 pages in, someone's like, hey, where's Tom? And I'm like, who the fuck is Tom?
Right.
And the guy's like, well, it's this dude. And I'm like, yeah, but you've never mentioned his name in the whole fucking book.
Right.
Oh, no. Yeah. And you have to find a way, of course, to mention the names without it sounding really lame. Like, hey, like Phil. Hey, Susie. And then, like, Phil, Susie, all the time. Like, there's ways of doing it. Sometimes it can just be as simple as, what if they're working somewhere where they have a name tag or something like, you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of little things that you can do to get that name across, and show it off without having it feel clunky.
Right. So let me ask you, okay, if you were talking to a new creator and they were looking for an editor, let's say that you weren't one, even though we know you are, what questions would you tell them to ask a potential editor?
That's a really good question, dude. Good for you. So first off, what's your experience? What part of editing would you say are your strengths lie in the most? And what part of editing would you say is the weakest for you? Like, I'm always very open, and I'll say, hey, art direction is something new to me, and I'm getting better and better at it, but coloring is still my absolute weakest. I can only tell you I like it or I don't, and vaguely now tell you why, like, maybe it's a little too bright here, or contrast, or I can throw around a couple of small words, but it's still not like that's the next thing I got to study up on.
Yeah.
So asking questions about their abilities in certain paths, and especially understanding the different things that an editor does. Right. So maybe even ask, like, what do you do as an editor? What are your jobs?
What are the different packages you offer?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because a lot of times someone will just come to me and say, I want an editor, and I'm like, okay, what do you want that editor to do? And they're like, what an editor does. And I was like, we do a fuck ton, especially in comics. Are you talking about you want a proofer?
Yeah.
You want someone to proofread? Okay, yeah, I can do that. Yeah.
But then there's I believe that most of them want you to project manage the whole thing, but don't know how to ask for that.
Well, and that, of course, is another side, project management, which is a whole other package, and usually something where that's another one where I'm like, I'm not excited about project management. That's not.
Do you project manage?
I've done it. I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. Money's money, but yeah, it's not one of my favorite things at all.
So one of the things I always tell new creators is, an editor can help you pick out an artist because they work with so many different artists that you don't even know about. And they can help you choose the styles that go along with your stories. Because if you're a new creator, you don't realize that there are several different type of styles, or what styles go with what genres or stories and whatnot. Do you help people pick out artists?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Artists, letterers, all of that. Absolutely.
Is there one certain thing that you tell new creators to look for when they're picking out this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So many of you writers out there, you get super excited by pinups. You go, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful picture. I've got it. And I remember doing a book for a client who I work with all the time now. And she was like, this is my list of, and she was amazing. She brought this list of artists, and she puts she says, this is my top guy. And she goes, just beside him, tell me what you think. And I was like, all right, first dude is a no for me. And she was like, what? That's my top guy. And I was like, yeah, it's a no. And she goes, okay, well, why is it a no? And I said, he has no sequentials. I haven't seen any paneling. And so a pretty picture is nice, but are you just going to get a bunch of fucking blocks on a page? What are you going to get? Or can they even do interiors? Right. Interiors is a whole other art form. And being able to storytell through interiors and not make it boring as fuck is huge.
That's a lot. One thing that most creators don't understand. Well, he's an artist. Why can't he do the inside? But can he do panels? And even if he can do panels, can he make that story flow in those panels to make it? Yep. I mean, people don't realize how much work it goes into it, and they just think, hey, as an artist, he should be able to. Just like whenever they think an editor, an editor should be able to edit. But
yeah, actually, Pops, that's a really good quote there, Pops. Absolutely, yeah. Sequentials is the art form. I mean, covers sells the book usually, but what's the interiors, the writing, the art, the sequentials, all that kind of stuff, that sells issue 2, 3. That's it, sells the series. And that makes people come back for more or recommend it to friends. So, yeah, the sequentials are huge and very much so, Pops, the art form. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I've always loved working with editors because of my first editor and because of you. You've been such great editors and helped me out so much. I feel like every time I work with y'all, I improve. And I think that's what an editor is trying to do, is improve the writing and project altogether. What is it that you're looking for in a client? I mean, has there ever been a client that you said, I can't work with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, besides me.
I haven't said no to you yet. Yeah, right? Well, I mean, maybe I'll come up with that one thing. You know what? One thing that a lot of people don't consider or understand is that different genres have different tropes and feels. So people might come to me with a certain story type, and I might go, I'm actually not the best dude for that. Like if you came to me with romance, I understand the tropes, but I'm not necessarily as interested or excited about it. And there's a good chance that I'm not gonna be the best person for you. Um, Horror when I first started was not my thing so much until I started to recognize A, the tropes, and B, the idea of the tension that needs to be created
Right.
through art and dialogue and pacing and whatnot. But that took a bit for me to get into because horror has never been something that I've enjoyed as much, if at all. So yeah, asking them, hey, how are you with this genre
Right.
is huge.
Yeah, and I that's what I try to tell new people. Make sure whenever you're talking to an editor, let them know what the genre is. Tell them the pitch of the story to kind of get
Yeah.
them going. I don't think you really need that script right away because if you're just hiring an editor, sometimes the editors can help with the script. And sometimes they're going to help you with that story pacing to let you know where those pages need to be. So
Yep.
it's not essential to have a full script. I would tell people to try at least to do 10 pages of the script. Go to an editor, ask them questions.
I'm even fine if they just come to me with an outline. I love a good outline so I know what it's going to look like. And you know what? The other thing that we haven't mentioned yet is your audience.
Right.
Who is the audience for this particular book? And if you just say, oh, it's for everyone, well, then you don't understand what you're talking about right now because that's not really a thing.
And that's what we were talking about in my last episode. It was ideas, audiences. Yeah. There's no one idea for everybody out there.
Oh. There's certain things that have caught on to the zeitgeist and everybody or so many people seem to enjoy and dig and whatnot. But even still, there's no single idea I think that everybody loves. So yeah, you still got to know your audience, and if it hits bigger than your audience, fantastic. But you should certainly aim it towards something in particular. I remember someone brought me an all ages book, and then within 3 pages beheaded a character, and I was like, that's not an all ages book. You can't do that.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like, okay, well then I'll do it off screen. I was like, no. You can't behead someone in an all ages book. You really can't, because you're gonna have kids who are like 8 years old, seeing this. And so there's no way to really mention, show, or even infer. Yeah, right. See, Pop like, holy shit. Yeah, I can imagine Pop's his reaction to that.
I don't know if I can agree with that. I mean, Disney does it a lot.
How many beheadings have been on Disney?
Lion King. They dropped and killed his father right in front of him.
They did not behead him. They did not cut his head off.
They strung up Tarzan's parents. They showed the silhouette in the background.
Yeah, and that's fine. It's different from a friggin' beheading. You know what I mean? Like literally separating a head from the body.
I think that's pretty intense. I don't think I could do that in all ages book though. But yeah.
Right? I mean, you can show death. And that is a good way of doing it is via the silhouette. A silhouette, even showing a silhouette with no head Crom could do it. But even showing like a silhouette with no head is a little messed up because the problem is that what you're trying to not show in usually an all ages book is blood. You also don't want to infer that blood is involved. It's why, like, think about like Star Wars. You don't see blood in Star Wars.
Right.
And so I mean, even like Han Solo gets shot in the arm, and was it Han or no, it was Leia got shot in the arm, and it was just like it was a burn.
Like a burn.
Yeah. So that was a little easier to sell, but had she been bleeding? Yeah, burn mark. So had she been bleeding, it probably wouldn't have sold as well. So and so, when you're talking about decapitations and stuff, blood's involved, and that tends to not work with young adult or with all ages audiences so much.
That'd be interesting to try, though.
If you can pull it off, that's great. I'm just saying, you're going down a tough road.
Right. All right. So, I mean, whenever it comes to editors and new creators, you said no to a few people. How do you explain somebody that you take on and their idea isn't exactly the way it should go? I mean, how do you break the news that it's not flowing right?
I mean, different people do it different ways. Some people are going to be harsh and they're just going to come at you and say, look, this does not work and this is why it does not work. And then other people, like I tend to kind of come with the velvet glove a little more often and kind of tend to be a little easier on things. And I try to explain it in a way that hopefully they're going to understand, appreciate, and be a little more susceptible to wanting to change things up. I think one thing that helps a lot is instead of saying no, this doesn't work, maybe offering some alternatives. Like, yeah, man, this isn't going to work, but what if you were to do maybe this or that, or there's a couple other ways that you could look at it. And I think offering up those alternatives, it's a way to keep from having to deal with a blank page, because writers obviously, and this, we get scared of a blank page, because once you see like you're at a wall and you don't know what to do, there's nothing there, that's a scary place to be. So any chance you can give them a way out or some other path, or even just the inspiration that will be needed to get to that other path, it helps a lot.
Man, yeah, I mean, and the ideas that editors have given me in the past that's helped everything just kind of go, and the things, the tips of the trade are just, I mean, just great. I would have never thought of half the things that I've thought about without you or my other editors in the past, and that's the way I say it. Like I tell people that editors are the unsung heroes because they do help everything shine, and they're in the background. So, have you ever put your name on something that you didn't exactly feel up to your standards?
Well, I will say I've certainly taken my name off of things.
Oh,
yeah.
Was that my book?
No, not yet. No, you would know if my name wasn't on there. But no, I remember there was one where I was asked to proof it, and this book needed a lot of proofing and a lot of work. But I proofed the whole thing, and then when I sent them the all of my notes, which was like pages and pages of notes, they came back to me and they were like, "Hey, the book is I got picked up by a publisher. The book has been approved." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's really cool. Congratulations. That's awesome." Like, yeah, we're going to print it now and start sending off. And I was like, "Whoa, what about these edits?" And like, "Oh yeah, they're not worried about it." I was like, "Oh, my name's not on this book, is it?" And he's like, "No, but I can put it on there." I'm like, No, the fuck you will. Like, do not put my name on this book."
Wow.
And he was like, "Why?" I was like, "I just gave you 4 pages. Why? 4 pages of notes. If your publisher is good with all of these spelling mistakes and changed voices and all these things, if they're good with all of that, then I don't want to be associated with them. And honestly, I don't know that you do." And they're like, "No, I really want to get this out here. And I don't think it's as bad as you say." That company went under and that book didn't sell. Just saying.
Wow. That's, I mean, I don't know where to go with that.
Right?
I mean, yeah.
And
no,
I would never like, I didn't say anything. I've actually told that story several times. I've never publicly mentioned the book because that's not cool. That's not fair to that person. Right. And they certainly, I believe, learned a valuable lesson from it. So I'm sure that they'll be better moving forward. But
and I've had a book or two where my editor decided not to put his name on it, and whenever they had asked me, "Hey, don't put mine," I was like, "That's your choice. I don't mind." But I can't imagine not taking what they say, especially after hiring them. Taking what they say into account, and especially if it's like grammar or spelling or whatnot. Yeah, trust your editor. I trust my editor most of the time. I mean, because there's always that one or two things that I feel like I need to convey that my editor doesn't understand. But, and like I said, with the cryptic hazing, it was just that one item that I really wanted to put through. But everything else was like, man, you hit the nail on the head with everything. There was like one or two things that you had made a suggestion and we had talked back and forth, and the end result was probably different than both of us originally thought. But, that's, I tell people, like I said, it's a give and take thing. Whenever you're dealing with an editor, you got to make sure that you're not going to get your feelings hurt, because everybody's trying to make the best product that they can right there. And if their name's going to be on it, you got to respect them to help out as well. Now, one thing I was asking or I was mentioning was, I like to ask people, anyone that I hire, hey, are you going to promote my book? Do people ask you that whenever they hire you?
No, because I think the reason that they hired me was because they know that I pushed the book.
Yeah.
Like they've seen that I tend to do that anyway, so that's usually not something that I'm asked. But I mean, I get it. Here's the thing: we don't pay our teams to do that, but it's certainly a bonus. So asking that is just a great way of, I call it it's Moneyball. Did you ever watch that movie? Yeah. So you can pick a team that is inexpensive, but they all push the book. It means that, cool, when it comes to marketing, you're saving some money because everyone is going to talk about it. Sometimes you're saving some money on the artist and they don't say shit. And you're like, okay, cool. I'm going to have to carry this load, but I know that going in. So yeah, it's certainly a question worth asking, but I don't think it should be the be all end all.
I definitely think that it's one of those things that you should always ask anybody that you hire. I think you did a great job in promoting me in both of my books, and I appreciate it a great deal. Having said that, I do know that there are some people out there that don't even mention the fact that they're on the book. And to me, it's like, I'm not asking everybody to go out there and campaign on 2, 3, 4 shows or 20 shows, because I think it's really the creators or whoever's putting that project forward. It's their responsibility. But just to have a person to make at least 1 or 2 posts, to say that they're a part of it, to me, I think that's a mound of difference. And I tell people to ask.
You know what though? Like sometimes they'll have a good reason. Like sometimes it's a nudie book, and they're like, "Hey, man, I don't mind doing the work, but like I had someone once, they were pushing a nudie book, and I'd tell them, can you not tag me right now? And they were like, okay, why? And I said, because I'm pushing a kid's book right now, and that just they don't work well together. And I really, I'm trying to give this kid's book as much push as it can get. And not to be rude, kids kind of sell themselves. Kids, not as much. And they're like, oh, you know what? That's fair. And, as long as you kind of let them know. And I mean, I've even heard of editors. I've gotten jobs because editors were great, but they were like, yeah, I won't work on, I don't want my name mentioned on any kind of porn or whatnot. And I'm like, go ahead, mention my name. We're good. It just, sometimes the timing's not great.
The thing is, I tell people, make sure you ask the question at the beginning, because if you hire somebody and expect it later on, you didn't ask at the beginning. So, I mean, even if you're okay with them not pushing it, or if they got a reason not to push it, then you'll at least know where you're starting off from at the beginning.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I tell them to ask editors is whether they're comfortable with the genre, if they're going to be comfortable helping you pick out art, or if they know how to do that, and how they're going to communicate. That was a big one for me. I've had about 4 or 5 editors altogether. And one of the things I try to always ask them, are we going to have phone calls? How often are the phone calls going to be? How involved are you going to be? So how often do you say you would be involved with an average 22-page project?
I mean, it tends to just be mostly like back and forth over like emails, messenger sometimes, and usually not a lot of calls. If it's a
Right.
lot of calls, then like a call is actually a fair amount of time out of
Yeah.
someone's, because you're not just gonna like talk for 5 minutes. It's not a thing. So
Right.
if you're gonna be calling me a bunch, I'm probably gonna charge a little bit more, or I might even say, look, I'm gonna charge you by the hour because this is a lot. Like maybe we're gonna talk for an hour or two. So I'm like, cool, this is what I am an hour, just so you're aware, and let's go from there.
Yeah, and like
So
I tell new creators, it's like there's some creators that don't like talking on the phone, and that's good. But I know that some editors rather talk on the phone than not. Some editors will just give notes and say, "Hey, here are the notes. Come email me when you're done with it." And I love the way we work because
and
that's what we did in Google Notes. You had
yeah,
basically, and then
love
we kind of
Google
went
Notes,
back. It was amazing. Yeah.
dude. And I like that back and forth. And then every once in a while, you're gonna hit this spot where it's like, we gotta talk this out. So cool. You call each other up and you go, okay, this one scene is not working. Let's work through this together. And you can talk it out. You can see facial expressions, hear the sound of their voice, understand now why it's important, what's going on, and you can do that. But I tend to use the phone calls kind of as a sort of a last resort, or if we really have a lot of work to do on tooling something and we just need to be able to hammer it out right there and then.
All right. So I think we're coming close to a close here. I wanted to ask you one or two other things real fast.
Mhm.
First, how do the people get a hold of you for your editing knowledge?
That's a great question. You can hit me up on Facebook, Chuck Pineau. You can hit me up on Instagram, same thing. Twitter at Chucky Pin. You can also just email me, Chucky Writes at gmail.com. Um, Fairly easy to track down. You can also find me on YouTube, Chuck's Raw Reviews, where not as much anymore. I used to do a lot of comic reviews. I still do that. Um, so yeah, you can hit me up there, and yeah, so that's where you can track me down.
All right. So the last question I really have for you, Blalock 3, how's it doing? What's
It's
happening?
doing good, man. We're 60% in, I think. We're like almost $3,200 out of $5,500 goal. We're only a week in, so I think it's going to be very good. I'm very excited by it. Super stoked to see how it goes out. And so far, oh yeah, I'll do that. Thank you, bud. Um, and so far it's going good, and the reviews have been uh, fantastic. I've been very excited. So trying to put
Well,
the
I've read 1 and 2, and I'm definitely looking forward to catching up 3. I'm definitely going to go back it this week, and I hope everybody else does as well. You want to throw a pitch of what it's about or what people need to
yeah.
expect?
Belial is an action comedy about the original creator of Hell trying to take his domain back from Lucifer and the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Each issue, he takes on a different horseman. Issue 1, thank you very much, bud. Issue 1, he took on War. Then in issue 2, he pulled a double duty and he took on both pestilence and famine. And now in this third issue out of what will be 4, he is going after death, but also he's dealing with the betrayal of a very close ally.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. I hope it's not me.
You're going to have to read it to find out, bud.
Yeah, yeah.
You heard it here, folks. Paul Gomez is going to get his ass handed to him by a demon. Betrayal does suck. I agree.
So, other than all that good stuff, what would you tell brand new creators if they came up to you and asked you what they need to know about an editor?
Yeah, you know what? I would go through a lot of the questions that you had already mentioned. I would certainly go through the different types of editing and the different types of things that you can ask of an editor. And then I would say you need to look at your book and your skills honestly and say, what do I need most? What things? Because of course, the more you're asking of an editor, the more they're going to charge you. So yeah, you're going to want to go through and figure out where your strong points are, where your weak points are. And sometimes that editor might tell you, actually, this strong spot isn't as strong as you think.
Right.
You might want to consider something else.
Right.
Hey, Jim.
Just got here for the ending. So this was Chuck, this was Paul, and my next episode next week is going to be on script writing. I hope you come back because I have a whole lot to tell. We're going to try to get a special guest on that week as well. Chuck, thank you. Thank you for helping me with my books. Thank you for being here today. Thank you. Thank
you for having me, Paul. I really appreciate you. Any chance you can hang out with Paul Gomez, it's the best. This dude in Dallas was so much fun. We had a great time. His kids are fun to hang out with. When he's had enough of them, he'll send them to your table, but that's okay because his kids are cool people. So yeah,
they took candy.
He did. He brought me candy, and I was like, "Damn it! That's my fat guy silver bullet. Like you brought me chocolate. Shit. All right, I guess you're hanging out."
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Y'all have a great day. See you next week.
I'ma get it, you know I be on the way. Yeah. You know I be on the way. Man on a mission, I'ma get it, you know I be on the way. Yeah, it's all hard, ain't no fear here. You ain't giving this to all, you steer clear. Never beat, I've been down and I reappear. You got some money on the line, you better put it here. Rolling in and doing that work.
Come get some.
The original intention of the film was just for my personal use, but I thought with it being such a unique thing that I'd like to offer it to anybody who wants to see it. Things like that. And it's just a unique film of him.
He says, I beat you. He says, they say we came in under the dead of heat. He says, that's not true because I beat you. And the American said, well, he says, if you like to think so, he says, but I know the real story. He says, I know I clearly won that one. See?
How do you end this thing? How do you put the where's the brakes on this bus? I forgot.
Jazz hands. Jazz hands are
Have a good night.
Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals. Every month, we add more.
Visit cb4k.org.